Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We learned this too late. There are things in life that we only seem to understand when it is far too late. Hard truths that no one tells us outright, or if they do, we dismiss them, thinking we are the exception. But the rules of existence apply to everyone, and reality does not negotiate. Time is the one resource that, once spent, can never be reclaimed. Yet, when we are young, we operate under the illusion that we have an endless supply of it. The days stretch out before us, and the idea that time is limited seems almost absurd. If we tell ourselves that there is always tomorrow, always another chance, always another moment waiting for us just around the corner, this illusion lulls us into complacency, making us believe that delaying our ambitions, neglecting our responsibilities, or wasting hours in meaningless distractions carries no real cost. But reality does not operate on our illusions. It moves forward indifferent to our perceptions, and it is only when we look back that we realize how much of it we have squandered. In the modern world, distractions are everywhere. Social media, endless streams of entertainment, and an infinite number of trivial pursuits pull us away from what truly matters. We tell ourselves that we deserve to unwind, that a little time spent here or there won't make a difference. But time has a way of slipping through our fingers unnoticed. A few wasted minutes turn into hours, hours into days, days into years. Before we realize it, we are standing at a point in life where our dreams feel distant, our ambitions remain unfulfilled, and our opportunities have either passed us by or become much harder to grasp. The realization hits too late when the energy of youth has faded, when the responsibilities of adulthood have piled up, or when the window for certain possibilities is closed for good. Every moment we spend doing something unimportant is a moment taken from something meaningful. Yet people do not understand the weight of this truth until they find themselves wishing for time they no longer have. Some look back and see the relationships they neglected, the skills they never developed, or the passions they abandoned in favor of fleeting pleasures. Others realize too late that their potential was not taken from them by external forces, but rather surrendered by their own inaction. Regret is the heaviest burden a person can carry, and the most painful regrets are not of things we did, but of things we failed to do. The deceptive nature of time is that it feels slow in the present, but moves rapidly in retrospect. A single day might feel insignificant, but when those days accumulate without purpose or direction, they form a life shaped by neglect. The most successful and fulfilled individuals are not those who had more time than others, but those who used their time intentionally. They understood, either through wisdom or hardship, that every hour is a currency to be invested wisely. While some spend their time on fleeting pleasures that bring no lasting value, others dedicated to growth, to building something meaningful, to making the most of the brief window of existence they have been given. Those who realize this too late often find themselves haunted by the realization that time is not forgiving. It does not wait, it does not pause, and it does not give second chances. Responsibility is often seen as a burden, something to be avoided in favor of a life free from obligations. Many people, especially when they are young, believe that true freedom comes from doing whatever they want, whenever they want, with no constraints or duties holding them back. They chase pleasure, avoid commitments, and reject anything that demands effort or sacrifice. But what they fail to realize is that a life without responsibility is a life without meaning. It may feel liberating in the short term, but in the long run, it leads to emptiness, dissatisfaction, and a deep sense of purposelessness. People who avoid responsibility often find themselves adrift, lacking direction and struggling to understand why they feel unfulfilled. Without responsibility, there is nothing grounding them, nothing pushing them forward, nothing challenging them to grow. They become trapped in a cycle of seeking pleasure and avoiding difficulty, yet no amount of entertainment, indulgence, or leisure can substitute for the sense of accomplishment that comes from taking on real responsibilities. A person who refuses to take responsibility for their life eventually faces the painful realization that their problems are of their own making and that no one else will step in to fix things for them. The truth is that responsibility is not a punishment, it is the foundation of a meaningful life. It forces people to confront their weaknesses, to develop skills, to become stronger and more capable. The weight of responsibility can be difficult, but it is precisely in carrying that weight that a person finds purpose. A person who takes responsibility for their actions, their choices, and their circumstances gains control over their life. They stop blaming others, stop making excuses, and start shaping their own future. The alternative is to drift aimlessly, at the mercy of external forces with no sense of ownership over their own existence. When a person embraces responsibility, they begin to understand that the most valuable things in life require effort and commitment. Relationships, careers, personal growth, all of these things demand responsibility. A strong marriage does not happen by accident. It requires dedication and work. A successful career is not handed to anyone. It is built through years of persistence and discipline. Personal growth does not occur without struggle. It happens when a person takes ownership of their weaknesses and strives to improve. Those who reject responsibility in favor of ease may avoid immediate discomfort, but they also forfeit the deep satisfaction that comes from overcoming obstacles and achieving something worthwhile. The irony is that the very people who resist responsibility in the name of freedom end up becoming prisoners of their own choices. They become dependent on others, controlled by their circumstances, and unable to handle adversity. In contrast, those who accept responsibility become the architects of their own lives. They develop resilience, capability, and a sense of purpose that cannot be taken away. They build something of value, not just for themselves, but for those around them. Responsibility is the path to a life that is rich, meaningful, and deeply fulfilling. Suffering is an inescapable part of life, yet many people spend their days trying to avoid it at all costs. They seek comfort, distraction, and escape, believing that if they can just steer clear of pain, they can achieve happiness. But no one gets through life without experiencing hardship. Loss, failure, disappointment, and struggle come for everyone, regardless of how carefully they try to construct a life free of discomfort. The mistake people make is believing that suffering is meaningless, that it is something to be feared rather than something to be understood. What they fail to realize is that while suffering is inevitable, the meaning they assign to it is their choice. People who do not find meaning in their suffering are often crushed by it. They become bitter, resentful, and lost, unable to understand why they must endure hardship. They ask, "Why me?" and look for someone to blame, believing that life is unfair and that they have been dealt an unjust hand. This mindset only deepens their suffering because it robs them of agency. If suffering is nothing but an accident, then there's nothing to be done about it, no lesson to be learned, no growth to be gained. It becomes an unbearable weight, something that drains their spirit and leaves them feeling powerless. But those who take a different approach, those who seek meaning in their suffering, find that pain, while difficult, can also be transformative. Finding meaning in suffering does not mean pretending that pain is good or desirable. It means recognizing that hardship has the power to shape a person, to forge resilience, strength, and wisdom. When people embrace this mindset, suffering becomes a teacher rather than a tormentor. The person who loses a loved one learns to cherish the time they have with others. The person who experiences failure learns the value of perseverance. The person who endures struggle learns the depth of their own strength. In every difficulty, there is an opportunity for growth, but only if a person is willing to look for it. Many of the most admirable individuals in history were not those who avoided suffering, but those who endured it and emerged stronger. They faced hardship with courage, took responsibility for their responses, and refused to let their pain turn them into victims. Their suffering became the foundation of their strength. It gave them a reason to keep going, a reason to push through, a reason to fight for something greater than themselves. The same is true for anyone who chooses to face suffering with determination rather than despair. Happiness is often seen as the goal of life, but happiness is fleeting. It comes and goes dependent on circumstances beyond anyone's control. A person who chases happiness above all else will always be disappointed because suffering will inevitably find them. The only way to endure the hardships of life is to build something stronger than temporary happiness, meaning. Meaning is what allows a person to withstand pain, to keep moving forward even when everything feels impossible. People often mistake freedom for the ability to do whatever they want, whenever they want. They believe that true freedom means having no constraints, no rules, and no obligations. But this kind of thinking leads to chaos, not freedom. A person who indulges every impulse without discipline is not free. They are controlled by their desires, their weaknesses, and their inability to delay gratification. True freedom is not the absence of structure, but the presence of self-mastery. It is the ability to make choices based on long-term goals rather than short-term cravings, to act with purpose rather than being pulled in every direction by fleeting emotions. Without discipline, people become prisoners of their own impulses. They waste time on meaningless distractions, unable to focus on what truly matters. They neglect their health, choosing momentary pleasure over long-term well-being. They fail to develop skills, avoiding the discomfort of effort. Over time, their lack of discipline leads to a life filled with regret, stagnation, and frustration. What they thought was freedom turns out to be a trap, a slow descent into mediocrity and unfulfilled potential. The person who never learns to control themselves is at the mercy of their circumstances, reacting instead of leading, drifting instead of progressing. Discipline is the tool that allows people to take control of their lives. It builds consistency, which is far more valuable than short bursts of motivation. Motivation comes and goes dependent on emotions and external factors, but discipline is reliable. It ensures that a person follows through on their commitments, even when they don't feel like it. A disciplined person does not need to wait for the right mood or the perfect moment to take action. They act because they have trained themselves to do so. This is where real freedom begins, in the ability to make decisions that align with one's goals, regardless of external distractions or internal resistance. The most successful individuals are not those who have it easy, but those who have mastered themselves. They understand that discipline is a form of investment. Each sacrifice made today compounds into something greater tomorrow. The hours spent learning, training, and working on their craft accumulate over time, leading to expertise and success. The ability to wake up early, to say no to distractions, to keep going when things get hard, these are the habits that separate those who achieve their goals from those who fall short. Discipline is not about punishment, it is about prioritization. It is choosing what matters most over what feels good in the moment. A life without discipline leads to dependence on others, on circumstances, on luck. It leaves a person vulnerable, unable to handle setbacks, and constantly searching for external solutions to internal problems. But a disciplined person is prepared. They are not easily thrown off course because they have built resilience through consistent effort. They have trained themselves to do what needs to be done, regardless of how they feel. This is what makes discipline the foundation of true freedom, the ability to act with intention, to create the life one wants, rather than being a slave to impulses and external forces. People avoid risk because they fear failure, but they fail to realize that regret is far worse. Fear of failure keeps people trapped in a cycle of inaction, convincing them that it is safer to do nothing than to try and risk falling short. But failure, as painful as it may be, is a temporary state. It teaches lessons, builds resilience, and provides the opportunity to grow. Regret, on the other hand, lingers. It follows a person for years, whispering reminders of what could have been if only they had dared to act. The weight of unrealized potential, of knowing that one's own hesitation was the reason for a life left unfulfilled, is far heavier than any failure ever could be. When people look back on their lives, they rarely regret the things they tried and failed at. Instead, they regret the opportunities they never pursued, the dreams they abandoned out of fear, and the chances they let slip away. They wonder what might have happened if they had been a little braver, if they had taken that leap instead of waiting for the perfect moment that never came. Time moves forward, indifferent to hesitation, and one day they realize that the window for certain opportunities is closed. The worst part is knowing that it wasn't external forces that held them back, it was their own unwillingness to take a risk. Failure is not the enemy, stagnation is. A person who fails at something at least has experience, knowledge, and the chance to try again. Every setback provides valuable insights, making the next attempt more informed and the eventual success more meaningful. But a person who never tries remains in the same place, stuck in a loop of indecision and fear. They convince themselves that they are playing it safe, that they are being smart by avoiding failure. But in doing so, they trade their potential for comfort, their ambitions for security, and their dreams for a life of wondering what might have been. The truth is, no one is immune to failure. Every successful person has failed, often many times. The difference is that they saw failure as a stepping stone rather than a dead end. They understood that failure is part of progress, not an indication of worth. They accepted that setbacks are temporary, but quitting is permanent. Those who succeed are not necessarily the most talented or the luckiest. They are simply the ones who refuse to let fear dictate their actions. They were willing to look foolish, to fall down, to start over as many times as necessary. People often overestimate the risks of failure and underestimate the pain of regret. They tell themselves they have more time, that they will act later, that they need to wait for the right circumstances. But time moves forward whether they act or not, and opportunities do not wait for hesitation. The cost of inaction is invisible in the moment, but it accumulates over time, leaving behind a life that feels smaller than it could have been. People tell themselves they will start tomorrow. They convince themselves that they need more time, that the conditions are not quite right, that they are waiting for the perfect moment. But the perfect moment does not exist. It is an illusion, a convenient excuse to delay action, to avoid discomfort, to put off the difficult work of change. The longer a person waits, the harder it becomes to take the first step. Time does not pause while they hesitate, and the opportunities they assume will always be there begin to disappear. The habit of waiting, of making excuses, of convincing oneself that there will always be more time becomes ingrained, and before they realize it, years have passed with nothing to show for it. Action is the only way forward. Thinking, planning, and preparing have their place, but they mean nothing without action. Many people mistake planning for progress. They read books, watch videos, gather information, and convince themselves that they are moving forward. But without execution, knowledge is wasted. Growth does not come from knowing what to do, it comes from doing it. A person does not become strong by reading about exercise. They do not build a career by thinking about working. They do not improve their relationships by hoping things will get better on their own. Nothing changes without effort, and effort begins with action. Fear is the main reason people hesitate. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of uncertainty. These things create paralysis. The mind magnifies risks, convincing people that taking action is dangerous, that stepping outside their comfort zone will lead to disaster. But in reality, the greatest risk is inaction. The person who avoids failure at all costs also avoids growth. The person who fears judgment never realizes that most people are too caught up in their own lives to care. The person who refuses to embrace uncertainty remains stuck in a life that feels stagnant and unfulfilling. Fear thrives in hesitation, but it weakens in action. The moment a person takes the first step, fear begins to lose its grip. Momentum is a powerful force. The hardest part of any journey is starting, but once movement begins, continuing becomes easier. Small actions compound over time, leading to significant changes. A person who commits to taking even the smallest step each day will find themselves in a completely different place months or years down the line. But those who wait, who delay, who tell themselves they will start when they feel ready, remain in the same place indefinitely. Readiness is a myth. No one ever truly feels ready. The people who succeed are not the ones who waited until they had complete confidence. They are the ones who acted despite their doubts. Time is merciless. It moves forward whether a person takes action or not. The longer they wait, the more difficult it becomes to break free from the inertia of hesitation. The only way to create change, to move towards something better, to avoid the regret of wasted years, is to act now. Thanks for watching.